Welcome to Discover Indie Film. I'm your host, Jeff Howard, and I've got Bill Prokopow with me.
Yes,
Bill.
you do. Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm good, and it is excellent to see you. I've already told you before we started recording that your film Entrainment, basically like an all-time favorite of mine. I mean, which is a compliment to you, but also it kind of just fits the things I find interesting just perfectly. So I highly recommend it to anyone and everyone. And I didn't ask you before we even started recording. I'm supposed to say, is it available yet? Can people check it out?
It is not available yet, though we are at the end of our festival run, and I'll probably do something like time the release of that with this podcast release, or something like that to help advertise the fact that it should be available now whenever you're listening to this.
Excellent. All right, I'm gonna and did the wonderful Karina, who's the producer of this podcast. Hey, Karina. She never gets mentioned, but I try to remember. Did she mention Indie Channel for it? You think that's a possibility?
I believe so, yes. I mean, I have a couple different options, so I just have to see what's out there.
And actually, in a genre like, I mean, it's sci-fi, and that gives you more options than someone with like a. God bless the people that make a straight up drama, but
God bless them.
But sci-fi and horror have specific homes out there. I know.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly sci-fi is my favorite all-time genre for sure. Partly because of the music, partly because of the ideas and concept, and partly just because I'm very oriented in kind of what's going to happen in the future and tech. I feel like one of my last previous lives, my incarnations, was actually in the future as opposed to in the past.
Very cool. And also, I mean, look, I meant, oh, wait. Part of the introduction is the Entrainment. Won 3 awards at the Sherman Oaks Film Festival last year where we met. It won for all three from the film. All 3 are Filmmakers awards, which means they were given out by the Filmmakers board, which is a jury of former official selections. So Sherman Oaks Film Festival alumni, your peers, that's who voted on these. And they gave you outstanding short film sci-fi, outstanding screenplay sci-fi, and outstanding creativity. So golf clap for me. But
I'm so grateful for all of those.
I mean, Lord knows you don't make a film hoping for awards, but then when your peers say, wow, you knocked that one out of the park, it doesn't suck.
Yeah. No, I'll take it. I'm very happy. I mean, this was my first film. This was a proof of concept for a feature that I'm developing. So kind of the whole thing came about because I really wanted to learn more about filmmaking. I didn't go to school to learn filmmaking. I studied music in school. I've been a musician all my life. And the first film that I made, or the first video recording I did, was back in elementary school when I had all my friends over to the house, and I filmed a chase scene in the backyard, and I got blood made out of corn syrup and red food coloring. I even had I had a rope tied between 2 trees, and I kind of made it my own gimbal with a swing hanging from the rope that was on a pulley that could go between the 2 trees, and I would be on the swing holding the camera and have my friends push me. So this was back in like 5th, 6th grade that I started making movies in my backyard. And then music kind of took over from there. I became very interested in composing and performing. And then I've kind of come back to film after all this time, is to really find a way to combine all these different interests that I've had.
I mean, that's really fascinating. And so, I mean, already you just revealed so much, because even at that age, you weren't just interested in film, you were interested in problem solving, how to get the image you want.
That's the best part.
Right?
That's
because
the most fun part.
For some kids put the camera on a tripod and goof around in front of it. And
I mean,
you created
too.
a gimbal.
But yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you were, because what I was going to say is I was going to say that, by the way, we already discussed this, but I didn't say that it is the first credit of Entrainment when the story. Well, it's a bit of a cliffhanger, but when it cuts to black, then you see written, directed, edited, and scored by you.
Yeah.
So that tells me that you're a person who loves world building. Mm-hmm. And what you said about 5th, 6th grade, you were world building already.
Yeah. I mean, I've always loved getting into it, and if I don't know how it's done, I want to figure it out. I want to know how to do it. So I've been, I moved to LA 5 years ago to score films, and to write music for trailers and to ideally score films. But I knew that's not just the only thing that I wanted to do. And so early on, my roommate, Luca Malacrino, who's an actor, he's the star of Entrainment, and a producer on it as well, we watched the movie Primer together, 2004, Shane Carruth, an amazing, super low-budget sci-fi film that Shane wrote, directed, edited, did the sound for, did the score for, and starred in. So we watched that one night and got into a big discussion about what happened in the movie. And I was very inspired, not just because of the content of the movie and where it took my mind, but also by the fact that it was one guy who put this all together. And here he made this thing that caused my roommate and I to have one of the most vigorous discussions about a movie that we had had so far. And he did it without any budget, barely. And so that night, I went into my room and I just started typing on my computer just a scene between two people that originally was going to be me and him, just sitting across the table. It started as the scene between two people with an earpiece that allows you to see into the future, and one person telling the other that they're going to die that night. And that idea over the course of 2 years developed into what became the short film proof of concept for Entrainment.
But so many questions, and I'm going to make you back up, way up. But we can still talk about the developing of that script. Mm-hmm. Did you write it as a feature from the beginning, and then choose to make? But you went proof of concept from the beginning.
Originally, proof of concept, yeah, because I wanted to discover if I liked doing this, if I liked the process, if I was actually compelled to go through it, because I didn't go to film school. This was the first script really that I had written, even though I've thought about this for a long time. So part of it was just like, hey, I need to write something that we can shoot for very little money, because I was going to self-finance it. I need to make something that we can shoot for very little money, where I can learn all these things about the process and figure out what are the things I don't know, what are the things I need to learn, and then what are the things I like about it, what are the things I don't like, and then I can move forward from there.
Excellent. All right, now I'm gonna back you up mm-hmm. to so you played around 5th, 6th grade with some film, mm-hmm. and then you got more interested in music. Mm-hmm. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the North Shore of Chicago, in a town called Northbrook. So I was born and raised there, spent my whole life there. I started playing piano at the age of 5, composing music then. I would raise my hand in kindergarten and ask to play my song. I just had one song at the time, but I played it. And my music teacher, Bill Vannanen, was super, super supportive. And then I became interested in choir, and I was in band. And then in college, I went to University of Illinois, where I majored in music composition. And then, I did the band thing. After college, I'm a member of this band called I Fight Dragons, and we went on tour all across the country. We did Warped Tour. We opened up for 303 and Cobra Starship. We were signed to Atlantic Records. I wasn't the main writer on that. I was doing keyboards, or actually, the band combined chiptune, which is sounds from 80s Nintendo gear, mixed with like power pop. So I was tasked with the responsibility of taking old Nintendo controllers and turning them into instruments by hooking them up to my computer and using them to trigger Nintendo sounds. So on stage, I would jump around on a Nintendo power pad. I would play Nintendo controllers and a keyboard that were all synced up to my computer to control these Nintendo sounds. And so I did that and sang back up. And then
You have the soul of an engineer.
It's in my background for sure. Yeah.
And for anyone who insults, and my older brother's an engineer, automotive engineer. Tons of creativity goes in engineering, right? Engineering is problem solving, but it's creative. Don't just think of like someone plugging away at something boring. But wow, congratulations on that.
Thanks.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah. We still have a pretty decent following to this day. I mean, the band is on hiatus right now, but last December we had kind of a hiatus show in Chicago, and we sold out. Now I'm trying to remember the venue's name, but we had an amazing sold out show before we went on hiatus.
And it was Hi-Fi.
I Fight Dragons.
I Fight Dragons. Oh, I thought it was Hi-Fi Dragons. I Fight Dragons.
I Fight Dragons, yeah. Not Imagine Dragons. I Fight Dragons.
Well, I mean, I asked, so I'm actually going to type it while you're speaking next, because it really sounds like up my alley. Like I could. It sounds like your role.
It's nerd rock.
It's nerd rock, and I'll go off topic for a second. Like, I love a band called Soul Coughing that actually just reunited, and they've got a guy, and his sole job is like he's at a keyboard, but really it's like these really interesting creative samples and using score from Bugs Bunny cartoons, bringing it in, but updating it, so stuff like that. But so it sounds really cool.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had that. That sounds like an amazing experience.
So I did that, and then kind of at the same time, I was transitioning into a solo music project called Will Post, which is kind of an alter ego solo project of mine. And that was like pop, a little bit of soul, also got into like psychedelic rock a little bit. And during that time period, I started developing live shows using projection mapping. And so, my manager at the time, JJ Italiano, he and I were talking, we would kind of discovered this new field of projection mapping where you point a projector at a series of objects and you can map out where you want the light to go. And we were saying, oh man, like I have this album coming out. It was my first full-length album called Pantheon. It gets into this psychedelic. It's like journey. It's this whole journey that the album takes. And we're like, man, we really should find someone to help us make the visuals for this album so that I can do live shows with it. Incorporating projection mapping would be really cool. And JJ was like, Bill, I think actually you could do that. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah. And about a week later, I sent him a video over text message of me in my apartment with having started the projection mapping setup. So then I started doing these live shows in my apartment where I'd have these insanely complex visuals mapped to this set that I built of these foam boards that surrounded me while I played piano and sang. And I did one version of that in my apartment. And then a few years later, I continued and did a full hour-long solo show with just me and the piano and 30 screens around me. And that's what ended up becoming the opening and ending shots of Entrainment, is using this projection mapping technique in version 3.0 of the set. I think the first version had 12 screens, the second version had 30 screens, and the third version had 70 screens. And that's what we used for the movie. So kind of going into Entrainment, I knew that I wanted to start off with a visually intense beginning. I knew that I wanted to knock your socks off as soon as you sit down to watch the film. I wanted to see something really cinematic, really big. And I was like, okay, well, I know I can build this set for not very much money. Again, I'm financing it all myself, trying to figure out how I can stretch the dollar as far as possible. How do I get the most bang for my buck? How do I get the most interesting image that I've ever seen right off the bat? And so that was also part of the process of writing the story. And it's like, okay, well, now we're in this kind of liminal zone where we're not in reality, we're in this fractured quantum realm. And that helped, along with that scene that I wrote with Luca, that helped form the basis of where we start from with Entrainment. I
just have to share my observation right now, which is I I always say to screenwriters, be aware that you're performing, right? Like it's part of a performance. And because you have this performance background, just now you completely explained to me why your film is so compelling right from the first shot, because you know what it's like to be on stage and need to win people over. Honestly, sometimes a lot of filmmakers don't get that. And the films that don't get into Sherman Oaks Film Festival are the ones that are like, oh, I can take 10 minutes to introduce my first idea. It's like, no, the fact that you have the experience of standing on stage and needing to win people over with audio and visual, I mean, that's nearly film school. You know what I mean? But it's better because you are aware of how compelling, how one needs to grab an audience and perform for them. So no wonder. I mean, because Entrainment is really just so well thought out. But now I totally get where it came from. Is that you had a background in this?
Yeah.
So you just applied what you knew about performance to cinema.
About performance, about editing. I mean, I feel like also doing these live shows and with the projection mapping, that I feel like I really cut my teeth editing with that. Because at the time, I was just pulling all this stuff from Vimeo that I could find. I wasn't creating the content. I was just pulling images, video. I was overlaying them, time stretching, basically taking all these elements and remixing them to get synced up with the music. So there's a ton of editing, a ton of layering in that, and it's all timed precisely to the music. And so I really learned how to edit and really enjoyed that process as well, and would sit there just for long stretches of time being like, man, I love the combination of music and visuals and putting this together. And like, there's so much that you can trigger inside of a person, and like you can get really deep through stretching out time and stretching out emotion using this format of music and visuals. And that's why I love theater so much, and why we had our LA premiere at Sherman Oaks Film Festival, was because I didn't just want this to be a film that people see on their computers. The experience to me of going to a movie is so much like a live performance. When you go to a live performance, the sound fucking hits you. It hits you in the gut, it hits you in your stomach, and the visuals hit you too. And movies are kind of my adult way of wanting to do that. Coming from the performance background, I knew I didn't want to be touring around in the back half of my life. I'm 40 now. When I started writing this, I was 36. But I knew I didn't want to have the life of a touring musician. I'd done that for a long time, and I loved it, and I loved the impact that it can give. And what I loved about films and wanted to really explore was how can you do that and scale that? Because, you know, when you go around and tour, you can play for 200 people or 2,000, or if you're Taylor Swift, maybe 80,000. But if you put out a movie and it does well, you can reach 1 million people in one weekend. And so this was kind of taking my interest in performing and storytelling and bringing it to a new format that I thought that I could do for the rest of my life, and move forward with that as a way to like really impact people and scale up my artistic prowess, I guess. Right.
So it was an intentional move in a way. I was going to ask how long was the performance with the image mapping? Was it a half hour? Or?
The big show that I did was an hour long.
Right. So you were nearly at feature film length already.
Yeah.
And everything planned out.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, to the frame.
Absolutely. Yeah. And through that too, it's not just here's some music, it's telling a journey. It's okay, like how do we start? What's the setup? What's the development? Where's the conflict? Where's the low point? Where's the high point? And how do I send you off? And I'd learned so much of that just in my life, studying performing, studying the elements of a good show. Also, when I was still in Chicago, I sang and played piano at a steakhouse for 4 years. And I was like one of the main performers Thursday, Friday nights at Mastro's Steakhouse in Chicago. So we would do 5-hour sets, and that's a ton of also like learning how to capture someone's attention and learning the flow of things. And if people are dancing for 3 or 4 songs in a row, you got to give them something at a slower tempo to kind of relieve the pressure. It's all about increasing pressure, taking it away so it stays interesting. So it's not boring, so it doesn't get too much, and finding the balance and the push and pull of those energies. And filmmaking is really where I love to explore that and tease that out.
And clearly you understand pacing and things, because it's funny, when you talk about playing piano at Mastro's, it for some reason reminded me of Warren Zevon saying, like I recall him in some interview, like he hadn't played piano for a while. And he said, because it makes me feel like that was my job. Like I played it. He played those kinds of gigs as a job. But some music producer finally said, you've got to play piano on this album again. He rediscovered the love for it. But you were understanding how to bring an audience along, how sometimes you do have to slow down, right? Yeah, if Entrainment was nonstop, if it was as stunning as the opening shot for all 10 minutes, the audience would be rubbing their eyes halfway, right? So yeah, you do slow down, and you do. Although, I mean, it's kind of stunning throughout. You clearly had attention for detail,
and it's purposely also like really intense throughout. So like the pace that it starts is intense, and there are moments where I push it. There are moments where I pull it back. But I knew that for a proof of concept like this, for a sci-fi thriller genre, like it has to start right away, and it just has to go, and you just have to be holding on for dear life.
And were you loving the project as you were writing it? Like it was.
Well, I mean, interestingly enough, the writing took about 2 years. It started off as 2 male characters, and I had the setup, and I kept trying to think of, okay, now how do I pay it off? And I went through so many different versions of how do I pay this off? How do I pay this off? What's satisfying? What do I buy? What's not corny? What's interesting? What's something I haven't seen before? And then it was actually on a trip to Austin that Luca and I did to go see Christina Higa in a feature film that she was in that was premiering at Fantastic Fest, I believe. That's when I got the idea. I was like, wait a second, maybe the character opposite Luca shouldn't be a man. Maybe it should be a woman. And I was like, oh, okay. Now this opens it up even more, because now story-wise, these characters have had a relationship, like a relationship. And I can tease that out now. And so then Christina ended up becoming the other lead for Entrainment. And so all of that happened in this one weekend, putting together like, oh, this character should be a female. This will play out better. And then I think within the next 6 months, I had the idea figured out. I had the ending figured out.
And what this and where the story went. And I hope this strikes you as high praise. What it kind of reminds me of, the relationship story, not at all derivative of it, but it reminds me of how inspiring I find the love story in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Amazing,
right? Because it's a love story that's crossing dimensional boundaries in a way.
Yeah, and that absolutely has to do with consciousness and our perception of things. Yeah,
and as someone who's in love with his partner, like I really appreciate, I love a love story that is way more interesting than 2 people meet and don't get along and then figure it out.
Yeah, this is not that.
Let's have a couple of dumb fights, even though everyone in the sitting there knows they're gonna. Yeah. It's not like quality relationship stories are sometimes a little hard to come by. But you did one.
Thank you, and I think the feature version it has way more time to dive into that. I'm very aware that in the short, I didn't have that much time, and I didn't spend that much time because at the time I wasn't all that interested in developing that relationship. I was more thinking plotty, and now with the feature, I'm thinking way more relationship based, and the concepts have changed a bit for the feature. So there is still an idea of that earpiece. I'm not going to say anything more than that, besides that the concept has definitely evolved and I think straightened itself out a little bit more, to be a little bit more clear, and still something that isn't going to take a ton of money to do, but I think is a compelling, interesting story that we haven't seen before.
And you've got to be a little aware that because of your personal skill set, what you're saying is not a lot of money looks like a lot of money to the public, right? I'm sure that people who looked at Entrainment at Sherman Oaks Film Festival last year and saw it on that 70-foot, on a beautiful screen with beautiful color and everything, I'm sure they were like, "Oh, that's the most expensive short in the festival," and I bet it wasn't.
Yeah, no, I mean, real talk, I spent about $15,000 to make it and shoot it.
And for the way it looks, people would have guessed 5 times that, I bet. But not that the dollars matter. And I normally never encourage people to talk money, but
it's a real part of it because to do this stuff, you need to have resources. Movies don't make themselves, and people don't work for free. You can pull in favors, and you can. I mean, I think at this stage of my filmmaking career, I'm not in position to make multi-million-dollar movies. So you have to figure out how you can stretch your budget as far as possible, how you can get the most return and get something looking like $1 million for less. And so then when you do have a budget that's bigger, you can keep that strategy and just keep pulling that.
You can. And obviously, I mean, your band was signed and stuff, but you weren't, like you said, you weren't Taylor Swift. So you learned but you probably learned how to do an amazing show, or the best possible show, for a lot less than those Pink Floyd motherfuckers and whatnot.
Right.
Not to put them down. Actually, I'm a fan, but
and the same thing with the Will Post live shows, where it's like, okay, this is just going to be me and a piano and backing tracks, but I'm also going to have 30 screens around me, and you can really go places when you set that up. Yeah.
And there is oddly, I won't bother analyzing it because I don't need to know why, but I'm certain that there's something more. There's something about all the separate screens being on screen that is more compelling than if it were just one. Like if you shot that character against a wall and just projected on the wall with no breaking up that image.
Yeah.
And the fact that, and obviously now your story is just explained. I mean, obviously everyone you've shown this film to is so impressed with what you do on all those different screens and images changing as he stands before this. I was about to try to be smarter about quantum physics, but honestly, I'm
fractured quantum realm.
All the
different possibilities of
what it represents. There's something I can't explain it, and I don't want to explain it, but there's something way more compelling about that broken up imagery, and you were using that on stage, and now you're using it in film, and it really is. It's way more compelling than just, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's what I discovered early on with the projection mapping stuff and breaking it in different screens. Just doing it in my apartment and putting on house shows in my apartment is like you get this show that looks crazy expensive because it looks like something you've never seen before. You're seeing all these things happen around you, and at the time it was just being done with one projector. So it's like really stretching.
Right, so one projector able to create multiple screens because you are. How time? I mean, it's incredibly time consuming to plan it all out.
Oh yeah.
Right. So it is. It's the old maxim: you can do it good, you can do it fast, and you can do it cheap, but you can only pick 2 of those 3. So you went with not too expensive and good, and you forgot about fast. You're like,
because I knew I had time on my side. Nobody was breathing down my neck to get this short done. So I planned it out. I scouted a facility where I could set up the screens, and I was like, okay, I brought a projector in there at the time, and I was like, how far can this projector get back? How big of an image can it make on this wall? So how many screens can I fit into it? So it was all kind of dependent on that location. It's like you got to put one foot in front of another and build the thing. And it's like, okay, now if I have 2 projectors and I bring these projectors as far back in the room as possible, how big of an image can they make? Now within that square footage area, how many screens can I put in there? And once you figure out the screens, then you go in the edit and you're like, how many different versions of reality that do I need to fill in each of these versions of the screen? And then you build it. And then it's like, okay, how big is each screen? What's the spacing? What's the distance between it? And then you
and
go
that,
and do it.
And at that point you're still only creating your canvas. You still haven't. Now you're going to paint into all that, right? Because you are really you're creating your well, I'll just stick with your canvas. Like you're creating it, and now you've given yourself something, and then you get to play.
Yeah. There are a number of things that we shot the day that we recorded that didn't make it into the movie. Just like even just visual tests of different footage or different ways to organize the different moments that gets really trippy and really interesting. That didn't make it in the short because they weren't part of the story, but they were kind of an extension of the creativity that I used in creating the live shows. And it's like, okay, like what can we do with this type of canvas that people aren't used to seeing? And it's like, well, you can do some really interesting stuff.
For sure. And you already shared that the first cut, or it might have been before we were recording, but the first cut was 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you looked at that and decided to just really trim it down, or were you unhappy with how the story was playing out?
Honestly, it was so the first version, I believe it came in at 18 minutes, 18 seconds. And that was the full script. It was an 18-page script. And to me, that had the beginning, the middle, the end that I was most satisfied with. And so I made that complete film. I scored it, I edited it, I color corrected it. We got it into a great place and started submitting it to festivals. And then I realized that a lot of festivals don't like 18-minute long short films. And under the suggestion of Luca, who had been telling me this from the beginning, to be very fair, and I just wasn't listening, he was like, you might have a better chance getting into festivals and getting more people to see it if you trim it down. So I was like, okay, well, I want people to see this film. Like, I don't just want this to be a thing where I just think I'm brilliant and all you have to just bow down to me. Like, no, I want people to see this film. I want to get this made. I want to play the game. And so so then I went in and completely recut it. I had to kind of restructure how the narrative was. We did add voiceover to make it work. And I rescored it again. And then that's the version that has been going out and getting a lot of love at festivals because people are actually seeing it now. And people are seeing that it still does hold together. I still think it moves a little bit too fast, and I do prefer the longer version. That's just me. But as long as people are seeing it and connecting with it and feeling something from it, to me, that's a successful first film.
Did I ask you at the festival to send me the long version someday?
I'm happy to.
Because amusingly, I mean, Luca was 100% correct about all the festivals except Sherman Oaks and Filmation LA. Because I mean, we even created a separate category, featurette, for films that are 20 to 60, and then 60 plus is feature and 20 below is short. Just because there's so much good work that's over 20 minutes now.
Yeah.
Something happened during lockdown, honestly, during COVID lockdown. It used to be if a film was over 15, it was just bad, honestly. Like they needed to cut it better. Whereas now I think people just really dug into stories and told them better at that length. And I can't explain it, but now we get so many good films in that longer range. We do it.
That's cool.
But that's because we're idealists and we just don't care about making any money at the theater. We know that we're losing money on every screening, but if we do a good job, we get more submissions and we can live off the submission income, basically. So that's whatever. That's the economic model. Okay. Yeah. But obviously, a smart festival programmer will just show you 10 7-minute films instead of 320s. Yeah, because every one of those people has friends. Yeah.
Though, I mean, at our screening, it was sold out.
Yeah, you packed it.
Yeah.
You and a couple. I could have looked up. I mean, you were in all our blocks are great, but that was a particularly good block, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also we only show good films, even if, which some festivals are too smart to do that. They know if they show the bad ones that have a lot of local support, they'll sell more tickets. Whereas, we whatever. Next month we're showing a film from Poland that obviously they have no friends here. Singapore, our first film from the United Arab Emirates. What do you know? He didn't hop on a plane to come out. But by the way, it's a feminist film. It's a documentary about an archery.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah,
very
a
cool.
woman who made it to the Olympics as an archer, but
Cool.
in a country where women have no rights. Fascinating. But anyway, that's us. So yeah, send me the 20-minute version someday,
Yeah,
so the voiceover is how you solve telling the story more efficiently?
Yeah, the original version plays out linearly, so to speak, and the shortened version plays out more like a flashback. So we start more near the end, and then we flash back through the course of the activity of the day, and because we have the conceit of the flashback and the voiceover, we're allowed to move a bit faster through some of the exposition, through some of the development, to get us to the present moment, which is where we start, which in the original version was closer to the end.
Right, closer to the end where, well, whatever, no spoilers, but where something pivotal is happening. But I do get the sense that the pivotal cliffhanger, in a way, is probably just setting up Act 2 of the feature.
A little bit. So it's definitely developed a bit, and it's, you know what, I won't even comment on it right now because it is very much shifting. But I do have the first draft. The first draft is like 93 pages, and I'm pretty excited with it. And I'll say more when the time is right.
By the way, it's so cool that it's a proof of concept for a concept that you kind of left open-ended, that you gave yourself room to change.
Yeah. I mean, there was a story that I wanted to tell in the short film, and then when it came time to think about the feature, really it was, I want to tell this story but in a deeper way. So I guess that's kind of to answer your question. The feature actually doesn't continue from where the short leaves off. It's more of a deeper investigation as to what happens over the course of the stuff that the short covers. So if you've seen the short, then likely you will have a spoiler for the feature, but most people aren't going to see the short. Most people would ideally rather see the feature, and that's where we're going to have a lot more time, and where the ending is also different, because in the short, there's not a lot of time for the main character to figure out what he needs to figure out. And in the feature, there is a lot more time for the main character to figure out what he needs to figure out. So,
yeah, I mean, he's basically a victim.
He's a bit of a pawn.
He's a pawn and going up against a foe who he doesn't know is his foe, and eventually, and talk about being outclassed in a battle. I mean, his foe, I would say, has an edge on him in every possible dimension.
Yeah.
Which just makes it that more compelling to, by the way, I'm all for you if you end up having the hero lose, but the Greek tragedy where I always, right, it's in Greek tragedy, the hero always had to lose. And then, and then cinema came along and they realized, oh no, the hero can only win. But either way, it's going to be a fascinating story for him to flip the scales,
and that is
or
something,
attempt to.
So I've been developing this story with my wife, who's also an incredible screenwriter, incredible poet, screenwriter, all these other amazing things. And that is currently one of the things that we're still talking about is like, is this a happy ending or is this a sad ending? And does anyone die? And it's so interesting too to be at this part of the process and also so deep in the feature and to say like, actually, I don't know yet. Like this really could go some different ways. In fact, when we shoot it, we might even shoot different versions, depending on and because it might also come together in the edit as to how we want how we want.
You
the
can
thing
break
to
rules
end.
and release both. Like you can do any like because honestly, I was going to add, and I'll slow down so I make sure I don't spoil too much. But that you have the possibility, like either side could actually be the hero anyway. Like there's something heroic happening.
Yeah.
The person I refer to as his foe.
Yeah.
That person is on a love mission.
Yeah, they're on their own hero's journey love mission.
Yeah. So there really are, wow, that is,
and they're doing what they think is
and
right.
how unusual is that? Like I can't name, normally the villain is the more appealing character in a movie, but rarely is it. Well, both sides kind of deserve, like it's unfair. Although in theory, I suppose I would go with the defender, not the attacker.
Yeah. But it's interesting, so my wife is from Indonesia, and she's very well versed in international films, and I'm learning so much about non-Western media. And I'm a big thing that I'm learning is that in a lot of international film, or a lot of the film that she grew up on, or that has an affinity for, the villains and the heroes are their own. In their own stories, their own heroes. And, a lot of Western storytelling tradition comes from, Sleeping Beauty, a lot of those Disney fairy tales where the evil character is just evil, and that's it. But so it's interesting developing this entrainment story and like really having this notion that like each of these characters really thinks that they're doing the right thing, and that it's not just a thing of good versus evil. And so then that's why we're still at this point with the ending where it's like this could play out in a few different ways. It kind of reminds me of Get Out, Jordan Peele's feature, which kind of has some similar consciousness, liminal zone, kind of being trapped in your own body type of themes. And the original version that they shot, the ending, does not go well for the main character. The main character, he goes to prison. He gets caught by cops and he's in prison, and it's not a hopeful ending. And they shot it. They did that. They screened it for audiences, and maybe it was a matter of when it was released or the time period that it was in, but audiences really wanted a different ending. And so they went back and reshot it where he ended up not going to prison and being a victor. And then that's the ending that we know and love today. So that's also kind of why I'm keeping this open, because sometimes you don't know until you're there. And kind of discovering it,
or even later, and you don't know until you're later, and audiences tell you, "No, don't give us something realistic," because obviously Jordan Peele is being realistic about what happens if a black man is around dead white people. What happens to him? Honestly, the ending of Get Out. But fair enough. It's still brilliant. I'm a huge fan.
So that's some of what we're exploring with the feature.
Right. So you're keeping it. You're on a path of discovery with the story, and I mean, and to me, like that's kind of an underpinning of the creative process. Like if you know everything going in, you're not discovering new territory, I think. And like this is kind of the only way that I've at least come to discovering really interesting solutions. And just finding throughout the process that like I'll have a solution to a problem, but oftentimes if that's just my first solution, it's my first solution because it's been done before or because I've heard of it. And so pushing through that and being like, okay, how can we get this situation to be more precise, more specific? How can we get a different solution that we haven't seen before that can tell us more about who we are? Superb. So are other ideas creeping into your mind? Or do you have?
Sure.
Yeah. So you have a little black book of outlines and ideas.
Sure. Yeah.
So you're really right because of your background, you're aware you can't just write one good song. You don't have anything, right? So you're actually thinking long term.
Definitely.
With this film career.
Yeah. And thinking too about like what's happening in the world, what's happening in the US, what's happening in politics, what's happening all over, because that affects how we view things, that affects how we make things.
It does. Although it's funny, I So I'm a kid of the 80s, and I really thought in 2016 we were about to get hit with a new wave of punk. And because punk, whatever, my perspective is punk was a reaction to Reagan. In this country, obviously. In England, not so much, but Thatcher.
Yeah, Thatcher.
But it didn't happen. So yeah, I don't know where things are headed,
but we did get some really interesting things like Chernobyl. And what I loved about Chernobyl was like it hits you over right at the beginning of what is truth, like what is real, how do we tell the truth? Are we responsible to tell the truth? Whose job is it to tell the truth? Whose job is it to lie? And Chernobyl did an amazing job of having that be the through line. And I thought it was so of the time that if it wasn't Trump and the era of no matter what you believe, we're seeing people with the exact opposite beliefs tell us that they are 100% correct. And saying that what we know is either misinformation or propaganda. And how do we reconcile that? How do we live in a world where we can't agree on what is truthful?
And one of the accidental consequences of the internet and social media is that someone who professionally misinformed the Russian public, coming up through the KGB and whatnot, is now able to globally misinform. Like what they did trying to contain the Chernobyl story out of Moscow is they're now, it's global. It's global.
And
tactic.
they're not the only ones. Like the U.S. absolutely does that and has done that for a long, long time.
Everybody.
So and it's of the time to talk about it and discuss it. But that doesn't mean our government hasn't been lying to us and the world throughout its entire inception. That's been a part of it. There have just been fewer streams to be able to call it out or to see what's happening. And now there are a lot more streams of information where you can tune into and see, like, wait, well, what's actually happening on the ground here? What are the people experiencing? Like, what are the results of this information?
No wonder Flat Earth is making is being resurrected, right? Because at this point,
it's all part of it.
Anyone can believe anything. Like it's disproving things, or confirmation bias can make anything true. Oh, no, that's not inspiring. Although obviously I'm a little biased, but anyway.
I mean, if we want a hopeful note to that, like I believe that this is all happening for a reason, and I think we're at the end of times in a way, and I mean that in a good way, because I think the times that we have been in are no longer supported by the energies of the earth and the universe, and that collectively, kind of, we're going to be moving into a new period where we're more spiritually aligned, where we are able to be more empathetic, and where we can humanize each other way more across all borders. And I think this does come with an increase of consciousness and a leveling up of consciousness, which is why I was so interested in entrainment to begin with, because it's all about the mysteries of consciousness. And so I want to shed light on the mysteries of consciousness, because I believe we're coming to a point in history where these old ways of doing things are going away, and we're living through that right now. I heard someone last week say we're not going to experience the Armageddon. We're experiencing it right now, and everybody is experiencing it in different ways. And what that really means is that things are ending that are no longer going to be supported moving forward. And to each person, that means something different. And every person is able to determine what that means for them. But that moving forward, both with AI, both with consciousness rising, and I think to get very crazy, I think we're going to see extraterrestrials make themselves known within a few years. And I think this will all come together to kind of really transform how we view ourselves as humans on this earth. It
would definitely be inspiring. I mean, it would obviously be world destroying for some humans to find out we're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever, I just look at the numbers and I'm like, well, depending on how many billions of galaxies there are, the odds of life not existing anywhere else, I just think it's zero. There has to be life elsewhere. But I was going to say, you also are you mentioned consciousness a few times, and the story of Entrainment imagines a future where our species is much better at understanding consciousness and working with it. Because right now we're not even sure. I mean, I've seen scientists who are way smarter than I am talk about that consciousness might be a misunderstanding, like a misfiring in our minds, almost like whatever they say what they say, but. But
consciousness is just a result of synapses firing in a way that makes us think that we
think we're aware, but we're not. Just like we think we have free choice, but we don't. That kind of. Yeah. But it's all philosophical. It's all.
Yeah, and I don't subscribe to that. I very much subscribe to the idea of like a soul and the idea of like an energy body that exists outside of the physical world, and the physical world is just a manifestation of things that exist on much higher realms in an energetic way before it comes into the physical.
I tend to agree. There you go. Yeah. Another reason why I love your film, obviously.
Right on.
Because it goes there. It goes.
Yeah. You know, like I wanted it to get people asking questions and think about what it means to be themselves and who are you. And
who's your partner and who are the people you love? Like, what does it mean to love this other person? It's that is actually a conversation that is had in this house quite often. It's like, you say, hello, well, what do you love about it? It's like, there's an essence to you that has nothing to do with the aging body, the this, the that, right? Like there's someone's essence, their soul is actually what you're connecting with. I mean, that's why we have terms like soulmate, right?
Yeah. So I think the world in 20 years, even in 10 years, is going to look very, very, very different. And I think that's a good thing. Like, I think I'm excited for that transition. And I think our understanding of consciousness will play a huge part in that.
Excellent. And I just want us to be off on renewable energy.
Right on.
Maybe I focus on it too much, but...
I think that's great. I think whatever extraterrestrials are going to come soon, they're going to show us how to do that.
Oh, that'd be very cool. Yeah, that's true.
That's my hope. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, anything that we're leaving out?
We're covering some good stuff.
Yeah,
here.
We covered good ground, and entrainment is we've covered entrainment. You want to explain the term entrainment?
Sure. So, entrainment is very much like the term entanglement. There are slight differences, but it originally comes from the phrase brainwave entrainment. So what brainwave entrainment is, in its most common Googleable form, is where you can wear headphones and where two different frequencies are put into your ears at a slightly different rate, which results in your brain hearing the difference of those at a specific frequency level. So your brain has a number of different states of consciousness, like the speed at which it operates. Your brain operates in theta waves, delta, alpha, beta, and gamma waves, and that's slowest to highest. I believe theta's first or is delta first. I always get them confused. But we're probably in beta right now because we're engaged in a conversation. We're aware. We're active. If someone's listening to this and relaxed and not doing too much else, they might be in alpha state. Then when you get into sleep and meditation, that's delta and theta state. Gamma state is when your brain is moving at really high frequency rate. So brainwave entrainment refers to the idea of kind of forcing your brain into one of those states via an external stimuli. So in the film, there's this idea that the earpieces, these future tech earpieces, that you can put them in your ears, or even one of them in your ears, and it will automatically raise up your brain frequency, jack it up into this high gamma state. And the gamma state is linked to things like really high creativity. Buddhist monks can meditate themselves into this state and report a sense of feeling oneness and connectedness to all things. And there's no upper limit as far as we know. Brainwaves have been discovered way, way, way higher than anything that most normal people ever achieve in their lifetimes. But either way, the gamma state is also associated with flow and like really deep focus, where you're so focused and flowing on something that time just goes right by. So entrainment is the simplified version of that brainwave entrainment phrase. And it's explained in the beginning of the feature as well as in the short, that entrainment is when you have this external stimuli that's forcing your brain or getting your brain to lock step with it, to be at this certain rate, whatever it is. If that makes sense.
It does, and I can't help but see a connection where a musician and composer would be interested in how because sound is a frequency and electrical impulses are frequencies. So I understand. I see a connection to why Bill would find this compelling and want to tell stories about it because your whole life has been watching how sound affects people and you know.
And tempo and rhythm and things like that can put you in a trance.
Yeah, and films have tempo and rhythm.
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. So, and that's one of the things that I was experimenting with, especially in the longer version of Entrainment, is like, okay, like I want this middle section, let's say, to be hypnotic. Like we're going to start with a bang and it's going to move fast, but I want the audience to be kind of in a trance state. And so I'm going to keep the tempo just driving. I'm not going to move it. We're not going to break. We're going to vary the pressure up and down. But I want the audience in different parts of the film to feel like they've been hypnotized. And so not only are the characters entraining themselves, but I'm also entraining the audience as they're watching the thing so that they experience on a deeper level what the character is going through.
You just made me aware of why I love some of those sequences in the back third of 2001, where no one can explain it, but Kubrick just decided to show us colors coming at our right. It's I don't know if you would call it psychedelic or whatever you call that, but like. Believe me, I know I've had a lot of people over the years say, boy, if I want to fast forward that part. And I mean, I could just stare at it for hours because it is it's probably affecting my brainwaves.
Absolutely. It's that space beyond words, beyond concrete ideas. And I believe that we all know what that is because we came from that. But, you know, there are so many words that you can say about that. And also there's a level that movies can bring you to that are beyond words. That's just the experience of it.
And it's perfectly fine for movies to just be funny or entertaining,
Sure.
but the medium has the ability to do this as well.
Yeah, and that's what gets me super excited to keep working and making more stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're also aware of distribution and that you can reach more people this way than you can on stage or elsewhere. Yeah. Where your physical presence is required. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. Any you've mentioned a few people. Are there other people to mention, or? And I feel like,
I mean, Luca Malacrino was an amazing producer and actor for the film. Christina Higa did an amazing job. Alex Hanno was our great assistant director. My wife Cynthia also helped with that short version and cutting it down. Some of her poetry and her great way of words. Alex Flanagan did an amazing job as DP. I'm like, I even though I did a lot, I didn't do it alone, and I couldn't have done it alone. And it was through the help of everybody that we made it what it is.
Yeah, and I don't remember. I think you might have said that you were friends with your performers at the Q&A. And if you did, I would have said, well, it seems like you had a casting call of 1,000 and found the two best people in the world, because I mean, they really are both fantastic in it. So it is, you remind me of something Spike Lee said to Kevin Smith a million years ago when Clerks had just come out, and Kevin Smith said something to him like, well, I mean, I use my friends as actors. You use your friends as actors. And Spike Lee responded, yeah, but my friends are great actors. Which was a wonderful, it's not like Kevin Smith needed to defend the acting in Clerks, right? Because we all knew that the people in Clerks are basically like giving line readings. But that, yeah, you had people who were great performers.
And we rehearsed a lot too. And what was cool about being the composer on the film was that I was able to write a lot of music before we shot. And then every time we rehearsed, I would play that music as we rehearsed it.
Oh, so you scored it in advance in a way.
And some of it I kept, some of it I didn't. But either way, like the intensity and the direction conveyed a lot. Like when I had Christina and Luca doing some of those intense scenes, and I had some really intense music that I had written that was hypnotic, that was trance-like. I was, they were able to key in to the vibration, the energy that I was looking to get. And I think that really helped us develop those characters together and then develop those performances.
That's fantastic. You reminded me, I was once on a set and an actor in between takes said, the music's going to be really important to this scene. And someone said to him, it's not your job to care about the music. And what you just shared was music can infuse it from the beginning. Yeah, for sure.
And because to me, in my process and the thing I want to make, music is so important to the final thing. And so I never wanted to, I never wanted to push it to the background because I knew it was going to be important to the final product, and I wanted my actors to know that and feed off of that.
Absolutely. Well, fantastic. All right, I'm glad I asked a really weak question, but then I got something good out of it with you sharing that you brought the music to the set. Excellent. All right. Well, I think we're good to wrap up.
Awesome. Yeah, this has been a pleasure, Jeff.
Yeah. We I don't know. We're at an hour, so I figure we're good. We're good.
Great.
And plus, I'm very curious to hear your favorite films. So I will share with you a little brag, which is. What is now Film Independent used to be Independent Feature Project here in LA, which is just, organization, a nonprofit that tries to help indie film. And I got to see Primer with Shane Carruth do a Q&A afterwards, pre-release.
Wow, okay.
And he was just this cool young engineer, right? He was an engineer in Austin working full-time in aerospace or whatever. And he was just this dude sitting at the front of the theater talking about his film.
That's super cool.
I was like, but did he do a third?
He did Upstream Color.
I know he did Upstream Color. I don't think he's
in a third yet.
Yeah, so I don't know. But I'm so glad he inspired you.
Yeah.
It's a very inspiring film, I think, more so than people realize.
That another big influence was Coherence, which was very similar in that it dealt with these very kind of highfalutin scientific concepts, but in a very grounded, low-budget way that kept me thinking a lot afterwards.
Was Coherence the one where the people were in the house during a dinner party, but then there's some multidimensional thing going around, and they're dealing with themselves coming from another...
Yep.
I only saw that film, I just have to share this, because... the third or fourth person on this podcast named that in his 4 questions as the lesser known that people should seek out. And so I said, hey.
Well, I'm going to steal that from my answer too, I think.
Oh, no. Well, you were allowed to if that's your lesser known that people should seek out. But yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, hey, I'll wrap us up. By the way, website or social media that people should follow?
Yeah. Prokopow.com, PROKOPOW.com or Instagram.com/Prokopow. Honestly, if you just search for Bill Prokopow, PROKOPOW, then you'll get all the stuff.
You are blessed with an unusual last name.
That's nice. I'm very Googleable.
Needless to say, you cannot find me if you Google Jeff Howard. I was not blessed with a unique name at all. But all right, and what Bill just shared will make clickable links. But now I will do my closing spiel, which is thank you for listening to the Discover Indie Film podcast. Like I said, check out the clickable links to get to Bill's stuff, and definitely watch Entrainment as soon as you can, because then you'll start sending him messages on Instagram going, "When's the feature coming out? I want to see the feature. Hurry up!" But anyway, I don't know why fans Hanoi people always have a lower voice like that. But anyway, so thank you for listening. If you want to learn more about this podcast or the TV series that was born out of it, go to discoverindiefilm.com. On social media, it's always at DIFwins. I mentioned that last year I met Bill at the Sherman Oaks Film Festival, where he cleaned up and got 3 awards for Entrainment. If you want to learn more about that festival that we hold every December, go to ShermanOaksFF.com, and it's at ShermanOaksFF on social media. Film Invasion Los Angeles is the sister festival that we hold in June. Just go to filminvasionla.com or at filminvasionla on social media. And finally, I did mention the Indie Channel earlier. You know, I'll even offer to Bill, like, hey, you could put the 20-minute version on it. Use the 10-minute version somewhere else. But Indie Channel, that's for indie film freaks who like, you know, who are willing to watch a 20-minute short.
Right on.
Or longer. Heck, we got a 45-minute short or a 45-minute film that is the Chicago skyline, like subdivide, like it's a weird mirror image thing of the Chicago skyline that someone set to music. God, why am I forgetting the title? Shame on me for bringing it up if I can't remember. All right. So anyway, so if you want to check out the Indie Channel, go to indiechannel.tv, or it's an app on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, Android TV, and then on your smartphone. But you should not watch films on your phone. I mean, I would say it.
Ideally not.
Yeah, ideally not. You can't hold it close enough. I'm sorry. And that's the Indie Channel. That is a little socialist experiment to see if we can get people to support indie films. So there we go. Bill, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff.
And thank you, everyone, for listening.